What if you could start defining your version of legacy, especially when it's not financial? I'd like to welcome Stephen Bowles to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely day. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure to host you, and I believe you're joining from the Philadelphia area of Pennsylvania in the United States of America.
Absolutely. Beautiful Bucks County.
Oh, welcome, welcome. Okay. Well, would you like to start us off with an icebreaker before we jump into the first question?
Sure, sure. Uh,
It
I'm
could be
sorry,
a,
that's my,
yeah,
just a
yeah,
little bit about me.
yeah. It could be a personal icebreaker, a professional one, just something
Sure.
interesting.
Yeah, well, I think one interesting thing is that we have a similar connection. We both grew up in military families and we both lived in the Middle East as part of that experience. My fun fact that I needed for a recent meeting that I was at is that I've been to 15 different countries.
Okay.
And I've never been to Canada.
Oh
So
my goodness.
out of 15 countries, it does
Yeah.
not include Canada. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's a great icebreaker, and it's interesting the number of veterans that are out there as well as the children of veterans. Probably you have a built-in discipline system now and the voice in your head to make sure you stay
mhm,
disciplined.
absolutely. Yep, it's part of my parents' legacy.
Ah, okay, wonderful. All right, well, let's start off today in this episode with the family office perspective. You spent 7 years working directly inside family offices, serving ultra high net worth families. What are the biggest strategic differences between how the ultra wealthy structure their affairs and how most 15 to $50 million families tend to approach wealth? And everyone else, the middle class, the working class, and so
Sure.
forth.
Yeah, the great thing is we can apply a lot of the same
Principles?
philosophies to exactly the same principles to our families as well. So the biggest thing is that they tend to think generationally and not short term.
Mhm.
And by short term, I don't mean the next 3 to 5 years. Short term is even retirement and even our lifetime. So a lot of planning is done for those latter years and so on and so forth. But they're thinking generationally. They're thinking, what are we going to do beyond just ours with what we're creating as our family? And that's really what legacy is it is multi-generational. It's a way to impact the generations that come behind us. And then they also tend to think about the family as a whole structure. So a lot of times we think about our individual branches. You've got generation one, then generation two has their different branches and they make decisions within there. But the ultra affluent, they're thinking about it all together and all family resources and how they complement each other, how they can help each other, and they're making decisions up and down those two generations. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. I think we all benefit when we try to break out of those silos a little bit, where we can help the upper generation, they can help us, we can help each other, our siblings, so on and so forth. And there's a really good takeaway from that.
Yeah, thank you for speaking into that. I have heard, although I've never spoken to a member of the Rothschild family, but I've heard that they will get together and share intellectual capital. It could be a
Yeah.
recent book that they have read, and they will again get together and share over that. They'll what they've learned, what's a good book, but again, it's that together time where there
Hmm.
is a commonality other than just the financial aspect. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I have heard the same thing, but that intellectual family capital
Mm.
is something that should benefit the whole family, not just that branch.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You talked about the philosophies, and then I think I kind of interrupted you regarding the principles.
Huh. Yeah.
Two-thirds of today's affluent are self-made, so I think it's especially important for someone who may be doing well in business. Perhaps they're building a company and they might be headed towards a liquidity event, or
Hmm.
they may be a part of the great wealth transfer that is happening right now. And if they did grow up in survival mode, and that's many
Hmm.
middle class or working class families, they may have not thought to get together at the dining room table and share their favorite book of the past week or month because they may have been working two jobs or three jobs. But I think it's
Hmm.
important to be able to invite access to, well, this is how a member of a family that has done well would structure it. And this is what they do. And here are some best practices and so on and so forth. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
anything else that you came across regarding strategic differences?
Those are some of the biggest ones, is just thinking multi-generational and thinking family, holistic, a little bit more broadly than what I've found in my own family in general and other families tend to think.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. How did you get into that work before I jump into the second question?
Sure. I worked in a family office for 7 years and
No, I mean, like, what
specifically,
did you study in school or what did
oh,
you do before that?
yes, yes. So studying in school, I have a business degree from college, and then it was really working in the family office that gave me the remainder of my education in that space is really just sitting down with those families, getting the best practices, really understanding how do they think about it,
Mm.
and that was what I did before starting Catalyst.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
Hmm.
sometimes people fall into things accidentally. Other times they might have a friend or family member. Oftentimes we do business with those we know, like, and trust, and that can open
Yes.
up a door of like, well, you might not know about how family offices work, but we like you and we know you and we trust you. Come on in. We got a problem that we need you to solve.
Yes, yes. In fact, that was my foray into the family office was know, like, and trust, invited
Okay.
in specifically to handle partnership relationships and internal pipeline, those types of things. So I had some transferable skills from my prior career, but then it became this thing where by the end of it, I was directly working with families. So I went in not even knowing what a trust was to
Hmm.
going in and advising with families.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let's talk about one of the challenges that the affluent deal with, which is second generation wealth collapse.
Hmm.
Oftentimes we hear about the third generation shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, teacups
Yeah.
to teacups, to the stars, to the stables, back to the stars again, or whatever. There's so many different
Yes.
metaphors globally because there's many successes that can happen with families. They may get into a business because what is it? Invention is the mother of all something. What is that expression?
Um, yes, I know what you're thinking. It's on the tip of my tongue. Yeah, yes,
and
yes.
then so they build this wonderful empire and then they
There's a
invite the
there's a
second.
problem that they're trying
Yeah,
to solve. Yeah, the
yeah,
problem creates the solution. Yes, yes.
yeah. um Something is the mother of all invention. Necessity.
Necessity. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. There we go.
necessity, yes, is the mother of all invention. Okay, we often hear that around 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation. From your
Mhm.
experience, what are the real other reasons behind that statistics? And what are the families who succeed? What are they doing differently?
Yes, yeah, and that 70% statistic, that's well documented. There's a NASDAQ article about it. But what I've seen, so there's a really good group called the Williams Group. They've been around since the 60s and they
I know them.
work. Yes, okay. So they put out a study and they
Mm,
showed that the answer to that exact issue seems to be that there's a family breakdown, lack of communication, lack of preparation. It's not poor investments. It tends to
mm,
be these other things. We think that the wealth goes away because somebody made bad investments, but it's really not. It's these other things, these communication pieces. So, my most successful clients are very transparent with with the next generation. I've been communicating with them for years and they're teaching them stewardship over their lifetime, not on their deathbed. And so
mm,
so they're preparing them, and when you're prepared and you have communication, so preparation and communication from that study, then you have a lot better successful results from that. And then obviously, if you do that with your children, then they have a guide, they have a framework to do that with their children. And now you've escaped that third generation erosion that we all talk about. And then the other part is that they really think about tax erosion, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later.
mm,
But tax erosion, so again, not really necessarily about the investment side, but about how do we how do we keep that and have less and less erosion unnecessarily.
mm. I think it's great that you've spoken into that. I think sometimes the skills and the talents and the capacities that allow the founding generation to succeed in business are separate than the capacity, skills, and talents to transfer that wisdom and knowledge and work ethic to the next generation or to the grandchildren, et cetera. It reminds me of during COVID, the CEO, I think at that time was Howard Schultz of, at Starbucks, and they expected him to like be a community leader. But the reality was he was a business person. And now
Hmm.
you're asking him to expand his capacities and his talents, etc., to take
Yeah.
on something that comes with success. And so I
Hmm.
think one of the things that does come with success is, let's say, congratulations, there's a liquidity event and that could be $3 million, 30 million, 300, whatever that number is. And now you're asking
Hmm.
basically that individual that has succeeded well in achievement to now be a great parent, to
Hmm.
now learn soft skills. And soft skills are much harder than people realize. It's like,
Yeah.
you want me to be vulnerable, Stephen?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. To be transparent, you're going to have to be vulnerable. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the biggest resistance pieces there. Especially from especially if G1's the wealth creator.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that resistance.
Well, I think if there's been aspects of control, so because I've controlled this, I've maintained the reputation. And now if I pass the baton,
Hmm. You're right.
I'm not passing the baton very well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's a different skill set, and if there can be, and I'm going to plug coaching and mediation and facilitation right now,
Yes.
then even if someone can show up once a week, they are better for it. But they have to be willing to grow and also to make that space that they may not have all the answers, and they're still willing to learn. And that could be
Absolutely.
hard on the ego a little bit, especially if they've become good at something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, they've been successful, so it's a very difficult transition to being vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I think a part of success is there's that momentum. And on one hand, you don't want to
Absolutely.
lose that momentum. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Hmm.
When you feel it like that success is at your back and you're riding that wave, the next phone call, the next email, and you know that even like, or even like where you're at today is the product of all the good decisions and maybe the bad decisions of the last, few decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think with that success momentum, then it's um, making that space of the uncertain. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There was a guest on my podcast. I know you shared you listened to a couple of episodes, Jay
Hmm.
Hughes, an attorney, and he had been a family advisor to the Rockefellers.
Mm.
And I thought it was especially great that the patriarch said to his son, do what it is that makes you happy. And the son said, well, I'm interested in philanthropy. Great. That was a win-win. It wasn't
Hmm.
like, all right, second generation, you've got to do what I'd like you to do, even if it's not a fit or a match.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So for whatever reason, that particular member of the founding generation had enough foresight to make that wise choice. And I don't know why they did, because sometimes people can just say, I've got access to resources. I want it my way.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think in the most successful families, they see that an ability um, to to support their children and being able to do things that they're passionate about.
Hmm.
And they do that, if they've raised them in a certain way and they have these passions, isn't it great if we can support that? Isn't that very satisfying as a parent that they can go on and do those things and not be as concerned about, well, what can I earn in doing this? And so if we were able to put something together that supports that, that's great. And,
Hmm.
and also and also put in enough guardrails that we can protect against bad behavior. So we
Hmm.
want to be able to support the good behavior. We want to be able to protect against bad behavior so that that third generation is still intact.
Yeah, I'm going to plug coaching again. So I hear sometimes like you use
Yes.
that phrase bad behavior. I think sometimes individuals may just need a couple of years of coaching before they find their way.
Yeah.
It's like a redirect of energy. And yet, when there is that pressure of, I don't want to say perfection, because it can happen at many different degrees regarding that pressure to be perfect. But
Hmm.
um, when there's been success,
Yeah.
and now there's expected success with the second, third, and on generation, and uh, and that's a tough spot to be in if success doesn't come as naturally or as easily, or they haven't found
Yes.
what it is that they are passionate about that's a win-win with the marketplace, or that's received the approval of those around them.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right where coaching is critical in that because why would G1 necessarily have the skill set to instill that in they lean on professionals for everything that they've done to build their business
Mm-hmm.
and experts. Why wouldn't they lean on a professional and an expert to help them prepare that next generation and the following generation as well?
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Let's chat about the missing middle in wealth strategy.
Sure.
Your firm focuses on entrepreneurs as well as investors with roughly 15 to 50 million in net worth, a group you describe as underserved. Why does this group fall through the cracks of traditional wealth management, and what sophisticated strategies are they usually missing?
Yes, the main reason why they usually fall through the cracks is most of my clients are first generation wealth builders, which means they have businesses, they have real estate, they're in private equity positions. These are all illiquid assets. So yes, on a balance sheet, they have a lot of net worth, but from a liquidity standpoint, they may be very low on liquidity. And if you're
Mm,
low on liquidity, you're not on the target in the radar of traditional wealth management because they need assets to manage.
mm-hmm,
So there's this missing piece there where they could have access to resources if they were liquid and they were plugged into a firm that can do that. But but what if they're not? And those are the people that I tend to work with that say, I need to know what are the best practices of families like me, and I can't plug into these other resources because I'm not liquid.
mm. Isn't that the truth?
Hmm.
Yeah, I saw a social media post, in fact, just about that today.
Yeah.
Ironic. Yeah.
So those tend to be the folks that I work with that I'm helping put strategy together on how are we going to transfer wealth. And I'm focused on the I call it the hard side, the actual structures. What type of estate planning can we do? How can we facilitate that? But I'm also telling them you really got to think about the soft side. You got to define what legacy means to you because all of the documents in the
Mm,
world and funding things correctly if they're not aligned with how you define that,
hmm
then there's going to be misalignment. And I'm not the coach to do that. Like that's not what I do. You need to use somebody. Oh, wow, we got Angelina here. So you need to use somebody, if you need help with that, you need to use somebody that can help you like figure that out and then make sure that your wealth transfer plan supports it.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting and also so important that we started out today's episode with the intention of what if you could start defining your version of legacy, because they need to start defining it, and most people
Y-
haven't. And a
Yes.
part of it is they don't know where to start, or they think they have to be perfect when they start, or and
Hmm.
sometimes you just have to jump in, like even if you have to start with, what is it not before you get to what it could be or what it is. Sometimes it could be a process of elimination, and and
Correct.
and sometimes you might not know, and sometimes you might have to find other examples, and it doesn't have to be done in 24 hours or 1 week or 1 month for it to
Correct.
really resonate and be true blue to your soul and to your families, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I'm curious, what is one best practice? Am I allowed to ask that, or is that like proprietary information
One best practice on
between for individuals that are between the 15 and 50 million in net worth?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing proprietary.
Okay.
Sometimes people will come to me and say, I think I need a trust, or I need a foundation, or I need this,
Mhm.
or I need that because my people in my circles, this is what they've done. And I always like to take a step back and say, that might be great for you, but we need to take a look at what we're trying to do here. Because one thing I learned really early on is that I'm looking at balance sheets, everything's being disclosed to me, and I'm putting together in my mind initially exactly how I would transfer this with the least amount of tax erosion, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the hat I have on. And then I meet with the family and I realize, oh, they've got these other priorities. And so you never go into a meeting with a direct solution till you've gone through that. So when I work with families, it's 6 to 8 weeks. And we're not talking about how any of the strategies work until about week 3 or 4. And then we're
Mhm.
starting to do the scenarios and we run different scenarios. But it's standard estate planning stuff. I say standard in the advanced planning world of dynasty trusts, gifting assets, discounting assets, selling assets, those types of things that are
Mhm.
very common. But again, there's an education that has to be there before people can actually even pull the trigger on it, to
Yeah.
even be in the right mindset to do some of these things.
Yeah, I know about dynasty trusts because
Yeah.
I wrote a blog article about it recently for another organization. But anyways, okay, well that's
Yeah.
great to know. And you're right. There is like when you spoke about advanced estate planning, you have to know what it is you're working with, and the more complex and
Hmm.
detail oriented, you can't just issue one remedy and think one size is gonna fit all. You've got to really understand
Correct.
what are the nuances of who and what you're working with and so forth. Okay, well that's excellent. And I'm glad that you brought up the softer side because I think the two do need to interrelate. They do need to
Hmm.
work together. And, you know, has that individual as well as family even define their values? And do their values even come into play? I think there was a gentleman well known in this industry, Dennis Jaffe, that just talked about a book or an article, something called Living Your Values. And I think
Mm.
it is a great privilege to be able to live your values. Not everyone gets to live their values. I mean, I still think
Yeah.
it's a conscious choice, but it's easier for some than others. Um, and we don't know necessarily the wall that they could get backed or the corner they can get backed into. And I don't mean
Hmm.
it just by net worth. I mean that sometimes people have to make hard choices. And if they can live their values in this lifetime, I think that's great. Um, yeah. And they could be
Yeah.
also influenced by family members and may not be able to stand up to another family member and they might not be able to live into their values. But if they could, that'll make that
Hmm.
legacy vision that much more tangible and long lasting. Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Okay, let's refer to and bring up the infinite banking concept. So, the
Sure.
idea of using whole life insurance as a private banking system has gained traction with investors. I've heard of this, but the listeners may not
Hmm.
have, some of the listeners. How does the infinite banking concept actually work, and where does it fit and not fit within a sophisticated legacy strategy?
Sure. Yeah. Infinite banking, at least on my algorithms, I'm hearing about it all the time, and I operate with a lot of clients that use infinite banking, and I use it myself. So at the core, though, when you look at all the content that's out there, and this will be on YouTube. YouTube has a lot of great content around it, but at the core, it's a philosophy of saying we've got our capital in different buckets, whether it's intentional or unintentional, whether we have isolated accounts that are for our short-term needs or mid-term needs, and then our long-term needs like retirement and legacy and so on and so forth. But where infinite banking comes into play is where is your capital for opportunities? And at the core, yes, it has a whole life policy in it, but a whole life policy is not infinite banking. Infinite banking is where am I going to put a portion of my opportunity capital? And so a lot of my clients, again, are real estate and private equity investors, and they tend to be really good candidates for infinite banking because they're constantly reinvesting and having cash flow come out at unpredictable times, and they need places to put that capital. And with whole life insurance, you're able to take policy loans. They're not considered underwritten loans like we typically think of, so they can be seasoned money when you need to leverage bank for another deal. And then they also don't have a payment schedule. So if you're in a private equity deal, you may not cash flow for 6 months or a year. You may cash flow a little bit. You may have a big lump at the end of 5 years. Well, great. It's good that you don't have to service that loan in the meantime, and then you can put the capital back at that point. So that's where it kind of fits in. You'll also hear a lot of language around properly structured. And one thing I want to clarify in that, because a lot of people don't talk about that, is what does that mean? All that properly structured means is you can take the exact same whole life policy, same insured, same premium, and you can within the software design that to be more geared towards death benefit or more geared towards cash accumulation. And so for infinite banking, you want that more geared towards cash accumulation. So it's one of those things that I'm like, oh, why doesn't somebody just say that? That's what that means. The people that are listening are not life insurance experts, so they need to hear that last little bit. So I wanted to make sure I talked about that today, just give people a little bit more clarity if they've heard some of that content.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I
Yeah.
think I mentioned just previously that two-thirds of today's affluent are self-made, so they may not have had exposure to these conversations at the dining room table, the breakfast table, the holiday meals. But as their success grows and they get exposed to new opportunities, it's important to learn the language and the concepts and what does this mean and how do I build off of that to keep
Hmm.
going and to make the best decisions. I mean, I think whole life insurance is amazing. I think it's completely wonderful and um, yeah, Sorry, a cell phone call just came in. I had to make sure it didn't ring for the sound
No problem.
quality. Yeah. But those are the nuances of,
Mhm.
what are the vehicles, the financial vehicles and tools that to help you get to that next stage to go from, the 0 to 1 million mark, and then from the 1 to 10 million mark, then from the 10 to
Yeah.
20 million. And there's different concepts and language for each stage and level. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I want to talk about tax erosion for a moment, but let me go to the
Mhm.
next question. Um, Liquidity and estate taxes. For many wealthy individuals and families, the biggest threat to generational wealth is forced asset sales to cover taxes. How can
Mhm.
tools like premium finance life insurance create liquidity and protect family businesses or real estate portfolios?
Sure. Premium finance. So let's just touch for a second on forced asset sales and covering taxes. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
in a position where your net worth is above the lifetime exemption, which is 15 per individual, 30 for a married couple,
Are you talking about
then
30,000 or
30 million.
okay? Okay. Just wanted
Then
you to
if your
clarify.
net worth, yeah, if your net worth's above that, then the estate tax on your assets above that at passing is 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get into a conversation about life insurance and advanced planning, and that's where premium finance comes into play, there's 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 several different things to think about. One is we've got assets, we want to move them to a trust because if it's an irrevocable trust, then we can protect that growth from that 40% estate tax. But we have a remainder estate that's going to be associated with estate tax. And maybe that's intentional because we want assets to get a step up in basis at our passing. People think about the buy, borrow, die concept. Well, the whole reason you do that is to get a step up in basis. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you get the step up in basis, but now there's estate tax due. So then we have to turn around and sell assets, right? So the buy, borrow, die concept is so that we don't have to sell assets, but now we're selling assets to pay for estate taxes. But if we have liquidity in a trust, and then we can swap those assets and they can be the liquidity from the death benefit can be used to pay estate taxes and we don't have to sell the assets. So that's like kind of high level where life insurance and advanced estate planning comes into play. So then that brings us to the next thing. Well, how do we pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're looking at the assets in the trust, we say, is there cash flow from those assets that can pay for insurance? Yes, then we do that. The answer is no, then the question is there cash flow that can pay interest payments? Because a bank will loan money to a trust to pay for life insurance. And that's what premium finance is. It's a bank directly loaning to a trust to buy life insurance on the life of the grantor, the person that set up the trust.
Mm-hmm.
So then we say, okay, can we just pay the interest payments because we're going to design a policy that will eventually pay the bank back and
Mm-hmm.
retain the death benefit in the trust? And then if the answer to that is no, then the next question is, well, can we gift cash to the trust to pay for interest to again borrow the money to buy the policy and then have the policy pay the bank back and then retain the death benefit in the trust? So that's premium finance at a high level. It's all about creating liquidity that can be used to buy assets from or swap assets with the estate at passing, and then doing that in the most efficient way, which may be by borrowing money.
Interesting. Again, this is the knowledge that needs to come to the forefront. It's interesting
Mhm.
how many Americans, as well as individuals around the world, um, don't know about trusts, particularly
Yes.
irrevocable trusts.
Yes, yes. And the word trust gets thrown around, and it could be people are referencing a living trust, which is revocable,
Hmm.
or it could be talking about irrevocable trusts, which are two very different categories. And
Correct.
irrevocable
Correct.
trust can be used for planning around estate taxes, but it could also be used for control. And oh, by the way, living trusts can have provisions in them that spring an irrevocable trust at your passing. So you can have assets. Maybe you don't have an estate tax problem, but you may sit there and say, but I want my assets to go into an irrevocable trust when I pass away. And you
Hmm.
do that in your living trust. So not to get too much into the weeds, but that's how they all end up sort of coming together.
Well, I think if somebody can understand the definitions of each, just as we started out today's episode with the intention of what if you could start defining your version of legacy, I think that if they can define and understand the definitions of what is a revocable versus an irrevocable trust is once you put the trust corpus or asset in, it's in. You can't just like take it out. So if
Yeah.
an individual, let's say, has a um, whether it's a residential or a commercial piece of property, and they put
Hmm.
it in a revocable trust, they can take it out if they need to do financing
Correct.
and put it
Yep.
back in. And then the bank, the lender, the investor will be happy.
Hmm.
Yeah. But if you put it in an irrevocable, once it goes in, it goes in.
It's in there, and now you've got different underwriting criteria
Correct.
for
Yeah.
lending there.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it impossible, but now it puts you in a different level where you have to work with different
And you
professionals
have to
to
find
be
those
able to do those
professionals.
things.
Yeah. You have to
Correct.
find those professionals. So again, if
Yeah.
somebody's moving from one stage of their journey to the next stage, they have to meet new people. And sometimes it's not so obvious. And you have to kind of, if birds of the same feather flock together, then sometimes the Rolodexes can be shared. If not, somebody, it's like, well, good luck. That's why I go back to this idea of sometimes we do business with those we know, like, and trust. Because if not, it's like the big
Hmm.
marketplace. And who do you trust?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trust is the verb compared to the noun. Okay, let's talk about when wealth becomes a liability. You've seen many individuals as well as families where wealth becomes a source of conflict or dependency rather than opportunity. How does something like a family constitution or governance structures help turn wealth into stewardship instead of entitlement?
Yeah. Well, family constitution and government documents, the big piece is that they force you to be very intentional about defining things. So if you are the first generation wealth builder and you have intentions for how you want things to go, then you want to document that. And family constitution is a great way to do that. It's a great way to open up conversations with your next generation and their children as well, and say, hey, here's our intention here. Here's what we want to be. Here's what we want to accomplish with this, with what we've been blessed with over the generations, and let's have that defined. And things that aren't written down tend to not be well defined. And the great thing about a constitution is it can also outlive you. So if future
Mm-hmm.
generations are benefiting from your financial legacy,
But
then
also, they
they
have a
also
template.
they need to have a template. So the Constitution helps kind of define the non-financial legacy part of what they're supposed to do with it. So that tends to be we're reiterating some of the things that we're talking about, which is we got to be transparent and we got to communicate. And
Yeah,
family constitution comes into that.
yeah. Sometimes in a trust, because I've worked with trust since 2013, they can call it like policies and procedures. It's called also in slang, when things go wrong, this is how we deal with it.
Yes, yes, yeah. What's our guidance? Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. And so I think a part of that transparency or guidance of when things go wrong, like, it's not just the bicycle gets stolen by the teenager. It's
yeah,
all types of things. Who's got the second set of car keys if they've got to go and get the car out of impound of a tow yard? It could be, and again, it doesn't even have to be drastic. It doesn't have to be even like drug and alcohol related. It could
correct.
be
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
that there was an argument, or even how we deal with communications. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes people don't mean to do triangulation, and there's like a phrase called narcissistic triangulation. Sometimes it might not even
yeah,
be narcissistic. It could just be, well, one sibling shouldn't go behind the back and talk with the cousin or the parent, and here's how we deal with it, so we can have a family culture,
mm-hmm.
or even a culture with a couple. If they're just starting out, like you said, you're dealing with a lot of first generation and they may not have heirs yet, or children. And so, again, how do they deal with establishing what is our culture? How do we deal with one another, particularly when problems come up and conflict and challenges? We could either be
Correct.
really wise and creative about it, or we can say the problem is bigger than us.
Yeah, yeah. A great, like a specific example would be, say you have a family vacation home, and you
Mm,
as the grantor, as first generation, your vision for this home is that it's going to bring the other generations together for vacations and to create epic memories for generations to come. Well, if you don't have that sort of defined out, like here's my intention, this is what I would like for this to to do for the family and to be protected. It's a priority for this to be protected because I want this for my future generations. What do you do when, two siblings live on the East Coast where the house is and one sibling's on the West Coast and they say, "Well, I never get to use that house. Let's sell it."
mm,
You go to
hmm
your documents and you say, well, look, this is the intention of it. It's not about just us. We need to steward this into the next generation so that our kids and their cousins and so on and so forth have this gathering spot, and it helps to navigate some of those things. So just giving you sort of just an idea of where that could come into play. And, if the first generation's passed away when that conflict comes up, it's really helpful to be able to go back to the documents and say, look, this is the intention. This isn't just something that dad told us over the dinner table one day, but left you out of it. It's
Hmm.
documented.
Yeah, and I think when it is written down, again, it's a reference point, and somebody can build off of it. They can. There's a document called the trust indenture. It could
Hmm.
be uh, 10 pages long. It could be 20 pages long. I mean, it all just depends. And it can also get updated because times change.
Yeah.
And the on one hand, the indenture could say, well, the beneficiary must fit the qualifications or the profile of this and this and this. Well, we're living in 2026 and it's different than perhaps it was 100 years ago or perhaps just a few decades ago. So I think, like you had said, better to have something written down than nothing written down, just to have something to
Yes.
guide. Because if not,
Yeah.
it's, and I think that Jay Hughes, that particular attorney that worked with the Rockefeller family, talked about money being like energy. And there can
Hmm.
be entropy, but also with the energy, you got to direct that energy. Because if not, you're going to have four chefs in the kitchen.
Hmm. That's a
And
good way to
we,
put it.
right. And particularly with successful individuals, they can have strong personalities. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was an interesting series on Netflix called The House of Guinness, and they did a reading of the will. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Yeah, I did watch that. Yep. Yeah. And the will is kind of the worst time to be declaring your wishes to everybody. That should have been happening much sooner than that, right? Like that idea of people don't know what to expect. That means they're not prepared. And
correct.
people that aren't prepared, it can become a major burden, and the outcomes can be significantly more poor.
Well, absolutely, because you're putting someone on the spot to quote, what we call in the coaching advisory world, dancing in the moment. Not
Yeah.
everybody is going to be great at dancing in the moment. Like when you had spoke about preparation and and if it's the lack of preparation that's affecting whether
Hmm.
or not the second generation does well with the wealth. Um, yeah, yeah. I just thought it was a very, yeah. I mean, it's a moment where you see the looks on the faces and the emotional reactions,
Yes.
and yeah, I think those children did probably better than most
Yeah.
because they did have some preparation because they hung around the business, but
Correct.
there's emotional aspects again that they have to deal with regarding everything else that comes with wealth. Like when I mentioned like Howard Schultz being connected to Starbucks as a leadership and now being expected to deal with the community, like in that show, the
Hmm.
oldest, the eldest son, Arthur, was expected to run and be a part of politics.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool. Okay. Anything else you'd like to say about family constitutions or governance structures?
Not really. Just to touch on kind of stewardship versus entitlement. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with how you instill your values into the next generation, but also documents can help with that. We talked about irrevocable trusts. Irrevocable trusts are a really good way to help the next generation have a safety net, but not give them a hammock. So
Mm,
if you don't want entitlement, probably your worst plan is to dump a bunch of money on somebody when you pass away, versus giving them access to something that has guardrails, that has a trustee, that has your intentions built into it. So just touching on that, because I hear that sometimes where people are like, well, I built this and I don't want my kids to be spoiled.
hmm
It's like, well, status quo is that's probably going to happen. So
hmm
we need to do some planning to keep that from happening. And some of that has to do, I don't want them to be spoiled. There's a whole conversation around preparation, right? But there's also access, like our intentions are going to be magnified when all of a sudden there's a lot of wealth poured upon us.
hmm So I'm going to bring up the flip side of that argument because I've got strict parents and I've got a
Yeah,
particularly strict father
yeah,
who was like
yeah.
a 12th generation American out of New England. I have a big opinion about seed capital that I think that children um, may not necessarily get or be spoiled, but there should be seed capital for their dreams and interests and let them start a business and fall down and let them start a
Mm-hmm.
second business and fall down. One of the fascinating stories about the Walmart family was the gentleman that founded it. He succeeded. I think he was like in his late 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from all those years of falling down and failing forward fast. And that allowed him to do what he did and to finally succeed. And I just think about that idea of like, oh, it only took me 18 years to become an overnight success. I mean, fill in that
Yes.
number. So if there is seed capital and that second or third generation or whatever can fall down and keep falling down, at some point they're going to develop skills and the muscles, especially, and I'm going to plug coaching and advisory services again, when
Yeah.
there can be a mirror held up to ask the question of, well, what did you learn this time? Like, what are those distinctions? Because we can expect that some individuals will be natural born leaders or naturally good at making money or naturally
Yeah.
good at business. Not everyone is.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, they've got to show up and practice for 10 years and then they go, okay, I get it.
Yeah, yeah. And mistakes, if when mistakes are made, if we don't learn from them, to your point, you're sitting there saying, what did you learn from that? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you don't learn anything from it,
Mm-hmm.
then it was a costly mistake. If you learn something from it, now you can say that mistake was tuition for that lesson.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. It wasn't a useless mistake because I did learn something. I can associate that with expense, but that's just my tuition.
Yeah. Well, I just find it so interesting because particularly regarding if I talk about our parents that probably had parents that lived through the Great Depression, it's almost like you get it right, and if you don't get it right, there's shame. So then you're dealing with
Hmm.
perfectionism or you're dealing with shame. And I think in 2026, to do really well in business requires the debriefs, whether that's a coaching session or with a mastermind group or your business partners or your close circle of friends and family, to say, okay, I went out into the commercial battlefield and here's how it happened today and what are the takeaways, and I'm going to do a debrief. Because
Hmm.
again, some people might be really good at dancing in the moment and other people, it's like they don't do well under pressure.
Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah.
great point.
Okay, that's my plug for the second generation because not all of them are spoiled.
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. But planning helps with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Abs-
Okay, let's talk about asset rich but cash poor. You warn that being asset rich but cash poor can quietly destroy generational wealth. Why is this such a major risk for entrepreneurs and real estate investors, and what structures can prevent it?
Yeah, well the biggest concern there with destroying the wealth is tax erosion. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
we're illiquid and we have an illiquid asset that's building our wealth. But now we have something called taxes, and now how do we pay for those taxes? And are we going to be forced into selling assets at an inopportune time and an inopportune time frame
Mm-hmm.
in order to come up with the capital to do that? So that's one of those risks that exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm kind of touching on something I mentioned earlier where we're just, yes, we want to make sure that we're reinvesting where we get our business biggest ROI, which is generally our business,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have to account for what are we going to do when we have liquidity needs, what are we doing to mitigate taxes when we can, and then how are we going to pass that along? So there's some really intentional needs there when it comes to how we're going to move that to the next generation and make sure that they don't have to turn around and fire sale a real estate portfolio. Everybody's going to know it's a fire sale because they know that somebody passed away. You're not going to get ideal prices for it in a short period of time. That can very quickly put a discount on wealth that you built during your lifetime.
Mm. Do you have a hard stop in 9 minutes?
No.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Okay, let's talk about business succession done right. For founders who have most of their net worth tied up in a business, what are the essential components of a proper succession and or protection plan, including buy-sell agreements and or key person strategies?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about buy-sell agreements, even though I don't draft buy-sell agreements. I don't monetize them in any way, because I see this as a very overlooked gap for a lot of business owners. They start their business, they get their formation documents, and then 5, 10 years go by, it's worth a lot of money. They have a partner, and their buy-sell agreement was overlooked or insufficient at that time. And then they don't realize it till there's what's called a triggering event. There's a death, there's a disability, retirement's looming, and now there's all this lack of clarity on what they should do. So buy-sell agreements help with a lot of that. So encourage anybody who's listening that has a partner in their business, take take a look at your buy sell agreement. Make sure there's triggering events, there's valuation language, there's installment sale language. Those are my quick three bullets that you want to take a look at. And if they're not there, you need to go meet with an attorney, reach out to me, and I can connect you with somebody or whatever. But that's an important gap,
Hmm.
and it makes a huge difference if one of those triggering events happen. It
Hmm.
also makes a big difference in family harmony if one of those triggering events happen, where you're leaving your family in a position where they're probably mourning, and now
Hmm.
they're worried,
Hmm.
and now they and the instructions are unclear. So buy sell agreements, can't talk enough about them. I've put other content out there on them because I'm so passionate about people making sure they address those. So that's an important one. But business succession in general, you also want to make sure that just because you started and built a business doesn't necessarily mean that you've positioned it correctly for exit. And so there's really good professionals out there that you want to be engaged with years in advance of exit to help you make sure that you're positioned correctly, and even make sure you're positioned correctly to transition to the next generation. Because sometimes people have in their head like, this is the value, this is, I'm going to build this business, then I'm going to sell it to my next generation, that's my retirement. That's not actually a plan. It often doesn't work out that way.
Hmm.
And so you want to make sure you have people in place that have helped you actually have a successful exit. Again, that's not myself. I'm not plugging my own services there. I'm plugging the fact that I see that be a major gap. And when people do it correctly, it's because they've planned 5 years in advance.
Hmm.
If you're thinking about selling next year, you're 4 years late.
Oh, that's fascinating. So a CLU is a chartered life underwriter. Is that
Hmm.
correct? Yeah, I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
you are the first CLU to be a guest on this podcast.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it has underwriting in the name, but essentially what it means is that I take a bunch of courses on well, life insurance. There's life insurance courses in there, but it's a lot more around the legal frameworks of life insurance and how they apply to estate planning and so forth.
Yeah, I think that these things are very important to plan. Like you had said, a lot of times, if an individual or a family is in mourning, that is not the time to be logical because emotions
No.
are going to be high and better to do it sooner than later. Celine Dion's husband, I thought, was a remarkable business person. And I think one especially remarkable decision was he planned out all of that estate planning to make it easier on her. And there was an age difference. I think he was a generation
Yes.
older, but I thought that was a fantastic smart, logical, rational decision to make
Yeah.
because it just meant it would be easier on the spouse and the children, etc. And because when that the mind is in that place
Yeah.
of yeah, you don't want to be logical in that moment. And so to even ask
Correct.
someone to be logical is asking too much of them to be, and I'm speaking realistically right now in managing expectations. So yes, I agree. People need to
Absolutely.
plan 5 years. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, and her husband did that because of the age gap. He
Renee.
thought about it, but even with no age gap, we're not guaranteed tomorrow, so we have to plan accordingly all
Hmm.
the time. And the last thing we want to do is leave our families in a position where they're mourning and fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. And when there's fear, the fights increase.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's really the fear energy that then causes the division and the conflict. So if you can eliminate that fear factor or as many of the fear factors regarding the,
Absolutely. Yeah, just
yeah.
touching on the other part that you asked about, which was key person strategies. This key person strategies, really what it boils down to is if within your business, if when you're building a business and especially a business to sell, a lot of times you want to be in a position where you can step away from the business because that's where you get the most value. Well, if you're able to step away from the business and it operate without you, you have key people involved. Those
Hmm.
key people are essential to the value of that business. So you need to think about, how am I keeping them, retaining them in order to also retain the best value of the business. So there's some things that need to be thought about, like that can get overlooked.
Hmm.
That's great. You did a step that most people haven't done, which is being able to remove yourself from the business by building it that way intentionally. But now you need to make sure that you're also keeping those key people on board, and there's different strategies for trying to keep them around. Also, what happens if you lose them to another firm? What
Mhm.
happens if you lose them from this earth? Like there's
Mhm.
things there, like not to be so crass there, but that you, again, just we're not guaranteed tomorrow. So you have to think through all of those scenarios as part of your risk mitigation viewpoint of your business, which is generally the most valuable asset on your balance sheet.
Yeah, thank you for speaking into that because tomorrow is not guaranteed. I know that Madison Avenue sells us immortality, and these days in 2026, longevity is the new buzzword. And we're all going to
Yeah.
buy every product and service regarding longevity and live to over 100. But we don't know if, like you had said, tomorrow we could walk out onto the street and get hit by a bus or the unknowns out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk about designing wealth that outlives us. When you step
Sure.
back and look at the individuals and families who truly succeed over multiple generations, what mindset or philosophy separates those who simply accumulate wealth from those who design a lasting legacy?
Yeah, the biggest mindset difference is they're thinking generationally. So
Mm,
that's one thing. But in thinking generationally, I'm going to really pull together some of the things we talked about. So thinking generationally, they're looking not at IRRs for every single dollar that's out there, but they're thinking, what is this doing for my overall plan? How is it affected by taxes? How is it affected by where does it fit into my overall strategy in general? So it's not always about what's my ROI or IRR on those assets. So
mhm,
they're thinking through those things and then they're preparing that next generation and the generation after them through documents, through education, through coaching, all of those things. That's
mhm,
very different than the people that are just accumulating wealth to retire comfortably and then saying, well, my family gets whatever's left at the end. That
mhm.
tends to be the different mindset.
Yeah, that's what I was speaking to earlier about the skills and capacities and talents when one is gaining the wealth, but then it's a
Hmm.
whole other thing to manage it once you're there and then to think forward regarding designing something that's lasting. Because sometimes people are just racing to the top of the mountain
Hmm.
and then they get there and then it's like, congratulations, you've got more work.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and then being very intentional about using the wealth during your lifetime to empower the other generation. So
Mhm,
if we're accumulating, retiring, and then just inheriting wealth, that means that the wealth is being passed down to the next generation, probably when they don't need it
mhm,
versus being very intentional about how do I help each generation be more successful on their own. And they're not as reliant on that future inheritance. They've been
mhm,
able to build on their own. And by the way, that's a lot more satisfying during your lifetime to be able to see that the outcome of that by being able to help those other generations. So I think you used the term earlier, seed capital, being able to plant seeds during your lifetime and actually see the plants grow as opposed to, hey, here's a bunch of seeds when I pass away, and I'll never know what happened with that. I will never know how well you did with it.
or I'll never tell you everything that comes with those seeds and
Yeah.
how to manage those seeds and
Yeah.
how I've got a couple case studies where planting those seeds do well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they may not need the seeds, right? So again,
Yeah.
the timing of when they got it, and being able to help somebody buy their first home, buy a business, do these things in their 20s and 30s is a lot more valuable than 10x that amount
Hmm.
receiving it in their 50s.
Absolutely.
Or in their 60s, so on and so forth. So just thinking about those things, they tend to do a really good job of saying, this is capital. How do we deploy it? Well, one of the assets we deploy it in is our people, our
Oh,
family members.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it is interesting. I remember I used to work as a commercial real estate broker, and I was told that when there is the sale of a large property, the commission can be so large that you could change addresses. And that is
Yeah,
absolutely true. And so when you're thinking about this idea about the seeds and like now I'm giving you this wealth transfer, that individual who is the recipient, the beneficiary, their address can change. I mean, their life can change, their
absolutely.
lifestyle can, their address, I mean, even just the fact that their address can change.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
don't necessarily mean from a rental to a house. I mean, or it could be from one house to another house or one neighborhood to another neighborhood. I mean, that's a big deal.
yeah.
That's,
And I'll give you another pro to that is
Hmm.
what I would also say is their vocation may not have to change. And what I mean by that is, say that generation, they're passionate about teaching children
Hmm.
and they want to be a school teacher in a particular school district. Well, if you can empower them to be able to do that and not have to sit there and make the decisions that, well, you know what, I have to go to this school district because it pays better, and now I have to go do this. You know, I got to pursue becoming a principal, or I got to do these other things, and they're empowered to be able to do what they're really passionate about. That's another thing that you could have that can benefit them.
Hmm.
Just taking off some of that financial pressure
Yeah.
that that causes people to move away from things they're passionate about, that move away from things that make the world a better place. Um, how great is that if you get to see that during your lifetime, that you are investing in them being able to do something that they're passionate about and makes the world a better place?
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of times people make decisions, and if money is any type of influence, it might not be the decision if they have based it on their values.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And now they're conflicting priorities. I've
Hmm.
got a obligation to my family, but I also feel passionate about this, but the two things conflict. So I have to take this job even though because it pays more, even though
Hmm.
it's in conflict with what I would rather be doing
Hmm.
with my skill
Hmm.
set.
Yeah, it's powerful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Hmm.
Okay, this is where we get personal on the Design Your Legacy podcast.
Sure.
In one sentence, what would you like your holistic legacy to be?
Sure. So for me, I have three sons, and my wife and I, we want our legacy to be one that reflects stewardship, and that's of all that God's blessed us with, which includes resources, but also more importantly, our health, our intellect, our empathy, and generosity. So
Hmm.
those are all elements of our legacy that is very important.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. We talked about, I think, earlier in this conversation about values. And sometimes I think about a legacy plan or a legacy vision as the metaphor of a chair or a bar stool. And so there could be three legs or four legs, and the legs represent the values. So, what do you think are your
Hmm.
top three or four core values?
Yeah, top three core values are to plan wisely, but be open to God's leading. So
Mm-hmm.
not be so closed to the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one that I really try to instill in them is and myself as well is surrounding myself with people that help you grow, but also looking
Mm-hmm.
for help ways to help others grow. So sometimes we can be so focused on being in the right room with these other people. It's like, hey, they're helping you grow. Who can you help? So we're
Mm-hmm.
got to look both ways on that. And
Yeah.
then a very practical, very transferable core value. And I got this from a friend of mine a few years ago, my friend Corey, and that is to show up. And how
Mm-hmm.
that manifests itself in our daily practices. If somebody who knows you thinks you need to be somewhere, show
Mm-hmm.
up. Just
Mm-hmm.
go.
Mm-hmm.
Go and be there, be present, and participate. And you get invited to a podcast, show up.
Mm-hmm.
Show up with the best information you can. Um, so just show up.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think when someone's presence is there, it changes the
Hmm.
outcome. It's like the observer effect regarding energy and matter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
show
What,
up.
yeah. What is a good website before I close this out?
Sure, my website's catalystadvisory.io. That's my website. And if people have questions about things, want to reach out, it's just Stephen with a V at catalystadvisory.io.
Wonderful. I'll make sure the website is in the show notes also.
Awesome.
Yeah. We started out today's episode with the intention of what if you could start defining your version of legacy, especially when it's not financial. And I think we have fulfilled that business promise today. Some of the great highlights of today's episode include this idea of looking at, in terms of the family office perspective of resources and how do they complement each other. There's different forms of capital, intellectual, emotional, et cetera, types of capital, spiritual capital, and so forth in a
Mhm.
broader holistic view. So when there's the family structure, it's not just thinking uh, uh, long in terms of generationally, but also how do we in the present moment have them all complement each other, and also preparing over a lifetime, not just on the
Yeah.
deathbed. We joked a little bit about how that's not great for the children, because that lack of preparation has the ripple effect in their lifetime. But also realizing that to be transparent, whether it's the family constitution or the governance structures, that allows support to the children and to lean on professionals and experts. And realizing also that there are trusts out there as one great vehicle that a listener can learn about. And today's a great
Yeah.
day to start. If not today, then tomorrow, but not next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And realizing also, lastly, that if you're going to think about things like succession, especially if you're a founding generation, start 5 years out compared to 3 or 4 years. Don't
Yeah,
shrink it and try and collapse timeframes. There are some decisions that are made that when there is time, better decisions are decided. So such is life,
absolutely.
and such is legacy.
Yes, that's a
All
great
right.
way. That's a great way to
Yeah.
put it. Yeah.
So for any of the listeners that are tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc., please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. And if you feel so inclined, send an email to either Stephen or myself and let us know your thoughts and feelings about today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Stephen, for speaking into your legacy.